If you can visualize it, you can have it. But what if every time you try, it just makes you feel worse? If you've experienced this before, today we are unpacking why that happens, what your imagination alone can't fix, and what to do to use your imagination more effectively to support you in changing your self-concept and taking charge of your future. Hello, my loves. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Lorena. I'm a somatic self-concept and identity coach, and I support you in bridging the gap between who you currently are or perceive yourself to be and who you desire to be or become, so that you can break any patterns that keep repeating in your life that you want to break out of, so that you can leave the past where it belongs, in the past, and instead create a life that you can't wait to wake up to every day. So if you've struggled to visualize or create the self-concept or reality that you want through your imagination, then you're not alone. You're not doing it wrong, you're not broken. I often have women come to me after having applied all these techniques and it hasn't worked, and then they wonder what they are doing wrong and they make it mean something about themselves. They tend to have this feeling that something must be broken in them, or that it's probably not meant for them because it seems to work for everyone else except them. But I promise you this is not true. Even if you and I have never spoken before, I know it's not true, because in all my years of coaching women to change their self-concept and step into a new version of themselves, it has never been true. You're not that special that you're the big failure and everyone else can do it. And I firmly believe in your ability to create the future that you desire, regardless of how big your dream, how big your vision is. And I'm not saying that in a bypassy, wishful thinking type of way, but in a way where if you perceive yourself to be a certain way, or in other words, if you embody a specific self-concept, that reality will become possible for you because you have already become it. I'd even say it makes that reality inevitable. And that's because your self-concept, the way you see yourself and the way you show up, will impact your choices, your behaviors, your thoughts, your reactions, your relationships, and everything else around you, everything you touch, basically. But it's often said in spiritual circles, and especially in the manifestation community, that what creates your reality is your imagination. And it's not quite as simple as that. Your imagination is indeed powerful because it is the initiator. Without imagination, without a dream, without a desire, without a vision, you're not even going to start. But imagination, and specifically visualization, is often used as a self-concept and manifestation technique. And that's where it gets tricky, because there's almost this assumption that if you visualize something, it's going to happen, which isn't really true, is it? Because how many anxious thoughts have you had that never came to fruition? How many things have you imagined that never happened? And how many things have you never thought of, never imagined, that indeed did occur? So it obviously goes deeper than just visualizing something, because the experience that you project out does not just come from your imagination. It comes from deep within your consciousness. Often so deep within your consciousness or your subconscious that you may not even be aware that it's there. These things are deeply embedded in you from previous experiences, childhood trauma, societal conditioning. We're often unconscious to it until we keep re-experiencing the same patterns, and then we ask ourselves, hold on a minute, why does this keep happening to me? And of course, the better question to ask yourself would be, what's going on in my subconscious that's projecting that out? Now, depending on the beliefs embedded in your subconscious about your circumstances, about other people, about you, and with that your self-concept, you might be more likely to ask, what is wrong with me? Not such a good question to ask yourself. But if that's what you're asking yourself, it actually tells you a lot about your self-concept, and it also tells you a lot about why doing techniques and visualizing and all the things isn't really working for you. So as a workaround, many women will try to bypass doing the deeper work in their subconscious, either because they don't know how, or because they're afraid of it, or because they don't have the right support to do it. They will try and bypass it by just visualizing or imagining the future that they really want. But here's what then often happens. And that is something that I have experienced personally. It is something that I've heard from clients again and again, especially those that have followed online advice, YouTube video guidance, or who have worked with other coaches before coming to work with me. They will say, I keep visualizing what I want, but every time I do, it makes me feel worse. Or it feels good in the moment, but when I come out of it, I feel really bad again. So why does that happen? Why do you feel worse after applying a visualization technique? Shouldn't it make you feel better? Now, as I said, visualization techniques are sometimes used as a workaround because you don't really know how to deal with, process, and change the beliefs, the feelings, the charges in your subconscious. So you don't deal with them. If you don't know how to deal with them, the tendency is not to deal with them. And it is hard to deal with them, right? It makes sense to find this difficult or to not know where to start. It's really deep work. It's not usually something that you can see all on your own. That is the nature of the subconscious, that it's not conscious. So then instead of dealing with them, you hope that visualizing different outcomes will soothe you and will make it go away. Almost like you're layering a new belief on top of what's already there in order to push it out of your consciousness. Now let's break it down though. There are a few reasons why visualization can make you feel worse. And understanding these reasons will help you shift the way you use these tools. Now, number one is when it makes you temporarily feel good, but that doesn't last, right? It gives you a temporary high, but then after the technique ends, after you come out of the meditation or the visualization, you feel worse again. You feel good while visualizing, but not so much after. That can often happen because you're not able to sustain the feeling throughout your day. You don't know how to integrate it throughout your day, or you find it challenging to do so. And also when you come out of a really beautiful visualization and you're confronted with the mirror of your external reality, the gap is a lot bigger. You see the lack a lot more because you have just bypassed it for a moment and you have just tried to embody something different, which then when you come out of it and you see the opposite, there is a bigger discrepancy between what you want and where you currently are. Number two, visualizing what you want can even in the moment bring up the exact opposite of that emotionally in your visuals, in your memory, because visualizing what you desire reminds you of what you don't have. So you envision the future that you want, but because your self-concept and your subconscious beliefs aren't actually aligned with that future, your identity isn't aligned with that reality. It's like your subconscious subtly comes in and says, no, that's not true. Who do you think you are? And it affirms all of the beliefs, all of the realities that you don't want, that you want to move on from, which can make the visualization process in itself quite uncomfortable. But there's a way around this, which I will tell you later in the video. Number three, it can also happen that instead of visualizing from your subconscious, which is where the beliefs live, which is what you want to reprogram in the first place, you're visualizing from your conscious mind. And what can happen then? You go into overthinking, such a classic. Now, if there's one thing that I see again and again in clients when they first come to work with me is that they live from their head, which I get because that used to be my tendency as well, which is why I'm now working so somatically and so much with the body and so much with embodiment, because it's not my go-to. I can be very cerebral, and it's the world we live in, and many people, including women, live from their head. But visualizing from your subconscious is also, by the way, what teachers such as the Christian mystic Neville Goddard or Dr. Joe Dispenza speak about, right? Neville Goddard with his state akin to sleep, that's a meditative state. And I believe Joe Dispenza works with meditation as well. It's very similar. It's almost hypnotic. And getting you into a brainwave state that is connected to the subconscious and not to the conscious mind obviously makes, not obviously, but it makes any visualizations, any beliefs, any affirmations land a lot better. Well, that's a wonderful technique. Everything has its limitations if you don't at the same time dive into the root and reprogram at the root what is actually going on. If you keep it at the surface, then you might see some small progress or belief shifts, but it doesn't fully shift because it needs to be integrated into your life. It's about the day-to-day, moment-to-moment, not just about how it feels then and there. But it's nonetheless a nice technique that you can use in addition to deeper subconscious work. Let me know how these 3 points resonate with you, and if you've ever tried to visualize something that you really, really wanted, only to feel worse after. Now, later on in the video, I will go into the limitations even more, so that you have real context around why this shows up in such a profound way and what you can do to change it. But before I do that, I want to invite you to check out the link in the description box, because I have linked a free resource for you, my free self-concept mastery blueprint, which is a breakdown of mastering your self-concept. You get a framework in there for what it takes to master your self-concept in an emotionally integrated, holistic, and embodied way, so that you don't stay on the surface, but you actually experience a rebirth of your identity. And you will also get a daily checklist in there so that you can apply it immediately into your life and see some tangible changes, some tangible results. So before I go into what to do and how to visualize or imagine or use any of these tools effectively, let's unpack where visualization tends to fall short. Because there are some big limitations around visualization and imagination that will then bring up these things that I earlier discussed. These 3 reasons for why it can make you feel worse instead of better. Now, the first limitation is one that I speak about very frequently, and that's that we can only imagine what we already know. We cannot imagine something that we have never experienced or observed. To an extent, right? For example, you have never seen a pink elephant because they don't exist, but you've seen the color pink and you've seen what an elephant looks like, and so you can imagine a pink elephant. But if I told you to imagine the color pink and you had never seen it before in your life, you had no concept of maybe even what a color is, you wouldn't know what to do with that. Your imagination is essentially constrained by inspiration, by input that it needs. Creativity doesn't always come from nothing. It needs some inspiration. It needs a spark. It needs a motivation. Artists need inspiration. Essentially, we're all artists, right? Creating your reality is an artistic endeavor in itself. Now, that inspiration for an artist, for example, can be their own lives. It can be inspiration from other people, other artists. It doesn't mean that it needs a lot of external input, but a spark is needed at least. Even in your dreams, your brain doesn't really make up new faces. If you see a face in your dream, if you see a person in your dream, it's often a person that you know, or at least a person that you've seen before. Because it's much easier for our brains to do that than to invent a new face and put like a nose and eyes and things together, components together that you haven't seen before in its totality. Now, if you often dream about specific people or you dream about people you know, there's also other reasons for this. It's not just the face recognition thing, but I'm not going to go into that because then we would get into dream work, which would warrant a whole different video. But dream work, side note, is also a very potent tool for subconscious work, shadow integration, and self-concept work. We do this in my program, Recreate Yourself, as well. Some of it is what I teach you, and other things are taught by an expert guest teacher who specializes in lucid dreaming. But let me release this tangent. The second limitation of your imagination is that buried pain and trauma is often in the way. Now, visualization can trigger old trauma and pain. And that can then lead you to avoid visualization as a tool because of what it brings up. Even as a coach, I once really avoided visualization. I remember years ago, I was consciously manifesting a relationship into my life, a romantic relationship. And I did this meditation, and it was a guided meditation. And the guidance, the words were beautiful. It reflected everything that I desired in a partnership. But it made me so incredibly uncomfortable to allow myself to imagine this, because going there actually brought up all of the pain, all of the trauma that I had suppressed, that I wasn't aware of. It brought up the resistance, the limitations, the lack of safety with receiving. So actually tapping into this beautiful vision that represented everything I wanted was just too painful for me. And that's because I hadn't done the work required prior to this in order to let my body feel safe, to let that vision in order to let my body and my consciousness fully receive what I was desiring and envisioning. And when this came up for me, that was kind of the point when I began getting trained in shadow integration, somatic trauma resolution, nervous system rewiring and integration and embodiment work. That's when all of this became such an important aspect of the work I do and the work I now coach you through in Recreate Yourself, because I had realized or experienced firsthand how important it was and how you would hit a wall if you didn't do this in the proper way. It's so important to heal from your past, and that's not to fix it. It's so that you can move forward into a new future. It's so important to expand your nervous system's capacity so that you're actually receptive to what you want. It's so important to work with your subconscious to reprogram the beliefs about yourself and the future you desire at the core. Because evidently, just visualizing something doesn't necessarily do it. It often brings up the opposite. It often doesn't feel safe to visualize something that feels far-fetched or that is completely different from your current reality, let alone something that brings up trauma because it's connected to something that once hurt you. Imagining a beautiful relationship that is everything you wanted can be really painful if your prior experience has been heartbreak or betrayal or abandonment. If you dared to love before and it led to you getting hurt, then now the idea of love, even if it's what you want the most, can bring up a lot of fear because of what you experienced before. The third limitation of using imagination is that it can create a lot of pressure. And by that, I mean pressure to do it right, pressure to visualize clearly. Now, if you're struggling to visualize, who cares? First of all, you don't need it. And also you're not doing it wrong because many people can't visualize. My clients know this, but the way I work is also not to dictate anything because your subconscious has its own way of how it will be easiest for you. And you may not have found that way yet, but there's no one size fits all. And I think people often look for a one size fits all. They often look for the magical solution by Googling or watching videos on YouTube and trying techniques, and they look for that to fit them when it might not. It might not be how their consciousness works. So I think it's really, really important to personalize this journey of evolving your self-concept and really claiming and embodying the reality that you want. For example, personally, I really don't like meditations where people are like, visualize a white light coming down. It just doesn't resonate for my subconscious. It just doesn't receive it. It's cute, but it's just not how my consciousness works. For me, it's really important with all the practices that I give my clients to make it very personalized and to design it in a way where the natural intelligence of their subconscious, the way they imagine easiest, comes through. Because that's the only way it will really land for you. Now, the fourth limitation is imagination is not embodiment. Now, what is embodiment? It means that there is an actual change in your state of being, in the way you feel in your body, in what you personify and what you become or who you become. So you're no longer thinking about it conceptually or in your mind's eye. You are living it and breathing it. That's when you have embodied something, like a personality trait, a state, an emotion, and so on. Now, that's first of all an art and a skill, but more so, it's gaining popularity, which is awesome. But the definitions that people have vary quite a lot. And that creates confusion. It creates discrepancy. It creates the assumption that you get into your embodiment through your imagination, which is simply not true. I have 2 videos in which I speak about this. One of them is about why I rarely ever use the word manifestation anymore, because that's a word that has become really distorted, and actually the same is true for embodiment. I'm going to link that below, and the other video I'm going to link below is more recent, and in that I go specifically into embodiment versus faking it and how to know the difference and what embodiment truly is. There are some misconceptions in there which are really important for you to know, because imagining something really doesn't mean you're embodying it, not even in the slightest. It's also not when you're practicing feeling your imagination as real, and also not when you do it a million times. It's not a guarantee. And that's why a lot of women feel stuck, because they use imagination, visualization, in an attempt to embody a different self-concept or state of being or reality. And they don't realize that what they're doing doesn't actually lead them to the becoming. And then when that's not working, they think that there's something wrong or they are doing it wrong, when that's not the reason, or is it the case. There is a huge difference between fantasizing or visualizing about something in imagination versus actually living and breathing it. So that can mean that sometimes when you visualize or imagine something, it can make you feel more disconnected from that reality. And in a similar vein, if you use visualization or imagination to bypass what's currently happening in your reality, or to get over some feelings that you're feeling that you no longer want to feel, nothing will change. Don't use visualization or imagination to bypass deeper emotional work. It can't be avoided. If anything, it's going to come up when you apply these types of techniques. Imagination is thought, embodiment is experience. So imagination and visualization, it's a great tool, but it should be your initiator. It should be an add-on support to trauma resolution. It should be an add-on to foundational nervous system and belief reprogramming work. It's not something that works on its own. In Recreate Yourself, we do this in a really holistic and intentional way. And anything connected to visualization and imagination, we actually really only do at the end of the program, because you really need the foundation in your state of being and in your self-concept first and foremost. Your nervous system needs to have the capacity to fully let it in and receive it. And your self-concept already needs to be at a certain level, at a certain place of receptiveness in order to let that vision in. From what I've seen, most people and most coaches kind of promote it the other way around, which I believe is why people get stuck in cycles. It's well-meaning, but it skips a lot of steps. So no, you're not doing it wrong. You just need a deeper approach. Your imagination is powerful, but deep emotional integration and embodiment is what actually changes your self-concept and ultimately your reality. When your nervous system, your self-concept, and your subconscious beliefs are finally aligned, then visualization won't just feel good in the moment. It will be felt in your body much more easily. And that's when you have the opportunity to make that reality lived. In next week's video, we are going to dive into a question that I get all the time, which is, do I really need to believe 100% in order to create what I desire? Or is the idea of having full conviction and 100% certainty maybe just a myth? Tune in next week, and I look forward to seeing you then.